Packer.
That's good. That's good. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. Hey, and welcome in, OWS fam. So glad you are with us. We are back in the DFS lab. As always, this show presented by 1 Week Season, where we build a lineup on DraftKings, use it as a way to talk through the upcoming slate. In this case, we are looking at the wild card round. We're back. We weren't. If you thought you were going to get rid of us because of the end of the regular season, no, we are back. Myself and StatATL are here. I'm your host, Cheeseman. We're recording this on Wednesday night, January 9th, and it's time now to welcome up StatATL. And Stat, listen, man, I know you missed doing this show with me, but we weren't going to do this again until next regular season. But I guess we just couldn't put off at least doing one more here.
You know, I reached out to the big guy, the decision maker, and petitioned to try to get at least one more. You know, maybe we'll do it again next week. Who knows? You know, I mean, call the shots around.
There's going to be another solid slate, you know, for the playoffs. You know, I remember, I used to grind really heavily in NBA DFS, and I remember like the point where you finally were realizing, like, but it was before they had Showdown, and you were like, it was the last game of like the, you know, Western or Eastern Conference finals, like where there wasn't going to be an opportunity for another slate. And you were finally realizing like, okay, this is it. Like, we're not going to be able to do anymore. Like, this is the last chance to play. And it's like, we still have at least one more slate, the divisionals, where, you know, I'd say you can probably do a show or something, can keep doing content. But once you get into like just 2 games or 1 game left, it's harder to put together that amount for just like 2 games or 1 game. But this week, dude, we have 6 games, wild card round. Any just overall thoughts for you for like the playoffs? Like, do you look at things any differently? Do certain like situations like home quarterbacks or playoff experience stand out to you more than like, does anything change for from the regular season for you?
In terms of like the players I consider, no, not really. I think the one thing that changes for me is I generally am like mostly like a main slate only guy. I will play all the slates this weekend. I'll play the 2-game Saturday. I'll play the 3-game Sunday. I'll play the 6-gamer, which I think is what we should probably talk through today. Yeah. I'll do Showdown on Monday. You know what I mean? Like, I'll play them all.
How many now? You've been grinding every day for 1 week season and for your channel as well, just doing best ball drafts. So you're probably you've been already just thinking through things for like weeks on end now. How many more days are you doing the streaming live? I know you're doing it at 5 p.m. Eastern every day.
Yeah, good shout there. I've been doing it about started I think on the 28th or 29th. So yeah, going on about almost 2 weeks now. Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. I've probably done 400 or 500 drafts at this point for playoff best ball. It's a format that I really love. I've had some great success with it. Actually took down the flagship contest on Underdog last year. I've had teams in the finals like every year. And so, you know, to me, I just really love chatting about it. Been doing those live streams every day at 5. Maybe I'll make you link one in the video or up in one of the corners.
Yes.
To today's or tomorrow's stream.
We'll link one up there. Yeah. Check it out.
Awesome.
I mean, yeah, because if you guys haven't checked it out yet, definitely check it out. If you're thinking of doing playoff best ball, Stat does some great content. He talks through kind of strategies while he's drafting. And there certainly is, you know, an edge to be had. So definitely check that out. You'll be streaming tomorrow at 5 p.m. So you'll stream. So you won't. So tomorrow will be the last day you'll stream, and then we're into it basically.
I will be live at 5.
Oh, sorry,
tomorrow.
No. Thursday and Friday. My bad. Because that's right. I forget we're recording this on Wednesday night, but you're watching this on Thursday. So you'll stream today and then Friday as well. Yeah.
I will stream Thursday. I will stream Friday. And I will probably do an emergency stream potentially on like Saturday, maybe at like noon or 1 o'clock, just depending on like the fill rates of the tournament.
I've
gotten pretty close to like the volume that I want to play and the contests, but you know, if they aren't filling come like Saturday, I don't mind putting in 2 or 3 hours and firing away. I won't build as many DFS lineups. I think for me the playoff best ball is higher EV. So I'll fire more into those contests.
Get that overlay, dude. Okay, well, let's jump into DraftKings here. And I think what we talked about, we're just going to go game by game. And so, got 6 games here. Let's start with this. And this, we're building a lineup for the 6-game slate. But like you just mentioned, there's the 2-game Saturday slate, the 3-game Sunday slate. You can do like a Saturday, Sunday only, excluding the Monday night game. Obviously, you have Showdown, but for this, we're going to do the 6-gamer. So let's start with this Chargers and Texans game. It's the first one. It always seems like the Texans are in that first, like the AFC South, it seems, is always in that first Saturday window, if my memory serves me. But Chargers, Houston, like what kind of stands out is we kind of start with the passing games here.
Yeah, so let's go one team at a time. You pick which one we talk about, and that'll help me kind of keep my thoughts thoughts aligned.
Sounds like a good idea. So yeah, let's start with the Chargers. They're on the road. Justin Herbert. Let's start there.
Yeah, so I mean, Texans D, they've been a pretty tough matchup all year for opposing quarterbacks. I think Cooper Rush is like the only quarterback to throw for 300 yards against them. Didn't exactly face a murderer's row of quarterbacks playing in the AFC South. They had Anthony Richardson and Caleb Williams, like Sam Darnold, Drake May, Rodgers, Cooper Rush, Mac Jones. Like they had some decent quarterback play. But generally, I think that like Justin Herbert's more appealing than it appears on paper. Like it's kind of showing as like a middling type matchup, but the Texans really didn't face too many strong quarterbacks. Herbert utilizes his legs. He's got over, I think, 300 yards rushing this year. He's got multiple rushing touchdowns. And when Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, and Anthony Richardson played this Chargers team, they all rushed for over 30 yards and a touchdown. And I think like the other mobile quarterbacks like Caleb Williams, Drake May, Josh Allen, they all had like 40 or 50 yards rushing. So I think there's some good floor for Herbert here.
Yeah, dude, I like that. And just it seems too like that rushing yards can maybe be a little bit higher floor in the playoffs too, just with kind of everything's on the line for these quarterbacks. Okay, so do you want to go just kind of down the line for the Chargers, or do you want to go over to the Houston side at quarterback?
Yeah, so for me, that's generally how like I do a first look. Like I just go position by position for each team. I kind of mentally take some notes of where I think maybe I'll put some bullet points as I come across. So like to me, like Herbert's kind of middling. Like he's not a no, but he's interesting. Like he'd stay in my original kind of my initial pool. Like at running back here, it looks like it's a tougher matchup for J.K. Dobbins. Like, DraftKings throws in that red fourth, that it's a really tough matchup. But on the ground, like 6 out of the 7 running backs that saw at least 20 touches accounted for a minimum of 99 yards and added a touchdown against the Chargers. So Tony Pollard was the only exception to that. The other 6 running backs who, got volume basically were successful with it. Like all of them had 100 or more yards and a touchdown. So I think when you look at J.K. Dobbins, like he saw 18 or more opportunities, I think, in 8 of his 12 games. So like in 75% of his healthy games this year, he was touching the ball 18 or more times. So I think that he's interesting. You're seeing here he's 6,200. That's a pretty middling price. Obviously a couple lower than him, a couple higher, but kind of middle of the road. I do really like him. I think he's interesting in this matchup.
Awesome. So Dobbins, you like is kind of a I like the numbers there, and certainly you see the big red 4. You wouldn't necessarily guess that the numbers you put forward about having at least 20 carries and 99 yards. So with that, let's look at the receivers for the Chargers here. What do you think? Or pass catchers, I guess we could just do kind of like group in tight ends as well there.
Yeah, so I mean, it's interesting because through the air, like the Texans have been a team that like you've kind of wanted to target. Their defense has allowed an opposing wide receiver to exceed 20 DraftKings points like in 8 games this year. So in half the games this year, you've gotten a really strong score from an opposing wide receiver. So to me, like Vlad McConkey, Quentin Johnson, if he's active, they're interesting. Like Vlad McConkey, I think quietly finished top 10 in receiving yards this season. And you know, he went for like 1,150 yards, and that was like higher than like Tyreek Hill and Higgins and Nakua, Mike Evans, like Nico Collins, AJ Brown, Garrett Wilson. Like some of these guys missed some time. But yeah, I mean, I think Vlad McConkey is really intriguing. Quentin Johnson's like 4,800, as you're seeing. I think, you know, they insist on giving him targets. And I think that this is a really strong spot for them with Josh Palmer ruled out. I think you're going to see a lot of action in this game. So to me, they're both interesting.
And then what about tight end? Like any interest in the tight ends for the Chargers?
Upon like first pass, like not really. Like I don't want to say because this is the playoffs, but like there's a decent number of like much better options. And if you take off the Chargers and you just show tight ends for the entire slate, like I think like the most expensive tight end is it Mark Andrews? Like who's the most expensive tight end on the slate? I don't have it.
Andrews,
yeah, it's Mark Andrews at like 4,700.
Not expensive. So,
yeah, not expensive. Like, so I don't know that I feel like I need to come all the way down to like Will Dissly. Like, I think that there's much better options on this slate. So that's probably a pass. The defenses, they're both kind of, neither of them really catching my eye, to be honest. Chargers the better defense, but they're on the road. I would say, I guess if you asked more about playoff things, like I am much more inclined to play a home defense in the playoffs.
Yep, same here. Okay, so let's now look at the quarterback situation. All right, CJ Stroud, man. I mean, it's been a bit of a down year for him, maybe compared to last year. Home playoff game. Where do you stand with him?
Yeah, I mean, the Chargers defense has been really stingy against quarterbacks all year. I think Joe Burrow's the only quarterback to throw for 300 yards against them. And I think only Burrow and like Baker Mayfield were the only quarterbacks to throw for more than 2 touchdowns. So like not a spot for me for CJ Stroud. He hasn't really played well the last couple games. There's only 6 games on the slate, 12 quarterbacks options. He's pretty close to the bottom for me. So no interest in CJ Stroud for me.
So I'll come back to the running back, but given you have no interest in Stroud, do you have any interest in his receivers?
I have interest in his receivers. One, I have interest in Nico Collins. Like Nico Collins is, in my opinion, like a top 5, 10 maybe wide receiver in the entire league. He's going to get fed. He's top 20 fantasy points in half of his healthy games this year. And so, I mean, I think that people are going to see that they've struggled. He's, a little pricier. But like all 8 wide receivers that saw double-digit targets against the Chargers, they all scored at least 14 DK points. 6 of the 8 had at least 19.5 points. So I think this is a spot where you can project Nico Collins to see double-digit targets. Like he is their offense. And if you're basically telling me he's going to see that, you're basically telling me I've got a 75% chance of him hitting 20 DK points. So to me, like, I think that keeps him intriguing if we're just looking at statistics.
Joe Mixon.
To me, probably not. Like this is a pretty tough matchup on the ground. Like they've Chargers have only allowed 4 rushing touchdowns to opposing running backs all year. The only running backs I think to surpass 100 yards against them like required a ton of usage. Like Bijan Robinson went for like 135, but it took him 32 touches. Derrick Henry went for 140, but it took him 24 touches. Chase Brown went for 143, 27 touches. You know what I mean? Like James Conner went for 152, but also like 22 touches. Like it's, I think that you'd really have to project Houston to keep this game really competitive. I think that if I was considering Joe Mixon, like I'd consider the Houston defense as well. That would kind of be my kind of takeaway from this game. But in general, like Mixon's probably viable if you think he gets volume, but he's 7,200. He hasn't topped 17 touches since like week 13. I just think overall, I think there's better spots on this slate. So to me, not a ton to love out of the first game. We hit on a couple of the points. You're on mute.
Let's jump over to Pittsburgh, Baltimore, and start with the Steelers, man, who have been on the struggle bus as of late.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens secondary kind of started the season as like a unit that every quarterback wanted to face. Like we talked about it on the DFS, season-long laps, like all season. But like since Joe Burrow came to town, I think that was like back in week 10, like no quarterback has thrown for more than 218 yards, I think is the top. So like they've really turned it around in the second half of the season. So, I think the matchup's a lot worse than it appears on paper. Russell Wilson faced Baltimore twice already this year, and he had scores of 7.3 and 17.4. So not going to, I mean, like Russell Wilson's really started to struggle. Like he's only top 20 DK points once in his last 10 games. So honestly, no interest for me on him. I think part of like these mental exercises that I like to do is while we're trying to identify like who are some of the plays that we do like, part of it for me is just like crossing off. Nope, no interest here. Because you can't play everybody. You really, even if you're going to play 20 lineups, 50 lineups, like 100 lineups, whatever, like you can't play everybody. So trying to just kind of take stands and eliminate is where I like to go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
If we move on to running back, man, ground matchups, like honestly, it's borderline terrible for Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren. I think Saquon Barkley, I think he went for 107 yards on 23 carries. He's the only running back to exceed like 63 or 65 yards against Baltimore all season. So again, like I feel like you could consider Jaylen Warren at 5,200. Just because like Rachaad White, Chase Brown, they both scored double-digit fantasy points against Baltimore strictly through the air. So I think that like if you had to pay down for running back, like he's in consideration, but like he's not my favorite cheap guy. So I don't know. This might be a complete pass for me as well. I think the only place that you could consider for me is probably wide receiver. Baltimore's again gotten stronger as the season has gone on. Wide receivers have, had some feasting against the Ravens, most of it in the first half of the year. I think Pickens went like 8 for 89 the first meeting, and then he didn't play in week 16 when he was injured. So, I don't know. I think Baltimore is probably one of my favorite defensive units on the slate, but I do think like Pittsburgh's going to be forced to throw more since I don't expect them to have any success running the ball. And Pickens is like, he's kind of the only game in town, the only show in town. So
he is.
I mean, he's not. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd say he's reasonably priced. This is definitely the lowest he's been in a little while, but at the same time, there are just a lot of like good receiver options on this slate, especially games that we're going to get to, and so the matchup is tough, man. It's tough to get excited about Pittsburgh here. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to touch on with the Steelers, or do you want to look at Baltimore?
Yeah, we can like I think wrapping up the Steelers, like I think Pickens only has one game all season of like more than like 20 or 21 points. I think his season high is like 25.1. So like at 6,300, like I don't see a scenario where you get crushed for not playing him. Like if he gives you 18 to 20, like, yeah, that's a strong score. It's 3x, 3.5x his salary. But like, again, there's some good wide receivers on this slate. Pricing isn't that tight. To me, I think this is it's probably a spot I won't rush to play any Steeler, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a fair place to leave it. So with that, dude, let's jump over to potentially the front runner for MVP of the league, but just still yet to prove himself in the playoffs. Lamar Jackson. The Ravens offense obviously is they can put up some fantasy scores worth having.
Yeah, so it's interesting here. I think this is an interesting spot because it's when they played in week 16, Lamar went for like 21.5 or something like that, very close to that. And so it's a small sample size. However, like Mike Tomlin and the Steelers have historically been able to keep Lamar Jackson like under wraps. In week 16 was the first time in his career topping 20 fantasy points against the Steelers. And he's been in the league a couple of years, and they play each other twice a year. So he hasn't played in every game, but again, this was his first game topping 20 points. Again, it's probably his best year statistically, but he's 8K. He's likely going to be missing his top target in Zay Flowers. So, I just off the hop initially, like at 8K, it kind of feels like a fade to me. Like,
yeah, I can see it.
To me, I think like the ground matchup is where where I probably want to look at. Like, I think it's probably slightly below average for Derrick Henry. There've only been, I think, 6 running backs that saw 20 or more carries against Pittsburgh this season. And, you look at like Jonathan Taylor, Rico Dowdle, Tyrone Tracy, Nick Chubb, Khalil Herbert, and Henry back in week 16. Like 5 out of those 6 guys scored 19 or more fantasy points. So like, again, it's a tough matchup, but I think that if we can count on Derrick Henry to see 20 or more carries in a game, I think that you're going to, because with Zay Flowers likely out, like, and he may have been ruled out. I haven't looked at the news today. I just think this is a spot where they lean on Henry. So I'm expecting him to be heavily leaned on. He's 8,200. I think he's going to carry lower ownership than Saquon Barkley, probably at the similar price point. We'll get to that game in a second, but that's probably where I'm at. I think he's a strong consideration for me.
Yeah, dude, Henry in the playoffs. Just that big physical running style of his, and it's it's going to be cold. It's tough to tackle him, like, just as it is. So I really like Derrick Henry. What about the tight ends for the Ravens, or the obviously I don't want to skip over receivers. I know Zay Flowers is out, so the passing game for the Ravens.
Yeah, so I think if you look at like the last quarter of the season, so like weeks 15, 16, 17, 18, like the Steelers allowed some pretty strong game lines to opposing wide receivers. Just the last 4 weeks, I'm going to read out some stat lines to you. 8 for 110 and a touchdown, 11 for 109 and a touchdown, 5 for 100, 8 for 79 and a touchdown, 10 for 96 and a touchdown, 8 for 84 and a touchdown. Those are just the last 4 weeks. You've got 6 really strong scores from pass catchers. So to me, especially with Zay Flowers out, like Rashad Bateman and probably Mark Andrews really become extremely intriguing to me as like value piece. I think you could throw Isaiah Likely in there as well. I think you could build a lineup with Henry and one of Bateman or Flowers and feel like you've got most of the offense covered. Or Bateman or like Andrews or Likely. I think you've got most of the offense covered.
Yep, absolutely. I like it, dude. Okay, and you already said you do like the Ravens potentially as a home defense. Did you say that?
Yeah, I think they're probably my favorite defense on the slate, to be honest.
Okay, awesome. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Denver, Buffalo. Let's start with the road team. Bo Nix, a rookie making his first playoff start.
Yeah, off the hop to me, like I think this is an intriguing, like interesting spot for Bo Nix. Like I don't think people want to play Bo Nix. But like Buffalo's faced 3 mobile quarterbacks this season, and they allowed Kyler Murray to go for 57 yards on 5 rushes, Lamar Jackson to go for 54 yards and a touchdown on 6 rushes, And Drake May went for like a 30 or 30 something yards on 5 or 6 attempts too. So like Nix is averaging 5.5 rushing attempts per game. He's put down some really strong games down the stretch, including like 3 straight games of 21 or more DraftKings points. And he's kind of in that mid-ish range at 6,300. Like, to me, he's intriguing. Like, I think I'm going to have some interest in him. You know, we've gone through and crossed off one quarterback in every game so far. So,
yeah,
you know, I think Bo Nix is interesting.
How about any interest in this Denver running game, which is just kind of a frustrating up to like a 3-way split?
Yeah. So surprisingly, yes. You know,
Okay.
this is a really solid spot for like the Denver backfield. Buffalo's allowing like over 4.5 yards per rush attempt this season.
Yeah.
And in the last 4 games that he played, like Jaleel McLaughlin led the Denver backfield in touches in every game, including 18 touches last week in a must-win game against Kansas City. So, you know, he's sub 5K. I think he's my favorite of the cheap running backs. We'll say 5,500 or what. I'm just throwing out an arbitrary number. Of the pay down running backs, I like taking shots on Jaleel McLaughlin.
Yeah, I can see it, dude. And you look at his game logs last week, you know, only had 2.5 yards a carry. And so I look at that, like, I feel a bit concerned, but then I look at some of his other games. He has some games where he's averaging over 6 yards a carry. So clearly he has the potential to have a better yards per carry average than last week. Because the 18 touches, if he can get that again, you're right, for 4,900, that's a good spot.
Yeah, and then if we move to kind of the pass catchers, like I think Buffalo has seen 5 pass catchers, so wide receivers and tight ends, that were targeted like double-digit times, 10 or more times in a game. And the only one not to exceed 100 yards was Christian Kirk back in week 3. So I think the passing offense is generally concentrated like completely around Cortland Sutton. You know, he's got 135 targets this season, and that's more than double than any other Denver pass catcher. So, you know, Sutton's got 10 games this year with 9 or more targets. And I think at 6,600, like, I think he's a strong play in a game that I expect Denver to probably be trailing. So I'm borderline thinking that you could go Sutton or McLaughlin, one or the other, in most of your lineups, and it would be a positive expected value play over the long term.
Love it. Yeah. I like that. Yeah, tight end. I mean, you know, hard to
no interest in Denver tight ends. No interest in Buffalo tight ends either, to be honest. Like, but let's start with QB and kind of work our way there. So, you know, Denver's defense certainly above average. Second half of the year, though, they've allowed games of like 500 yards and 4 touchdowns. So like Jameis Winston, 440 yards and 4 touchdowns to Joe Burrow. You know, Lamar Jackson went for 284 and 3 touchdowns. Justin Herbert went over 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, and those are just in the second half. So, you know, Josh Allen also, like Lamar, kind of having an MVP type season. He scored 20 or more DraftKings points in 80% of his games, including like a 54-pointer, a 44-pointer in just his last 4 games. So I think if we're throwing out salary, like Josh Allen has the highest raw point projection on the slate, including at any position. I think he is the most likely player to score 20 or 25 points at any position.
Absolutely. Yeah, love Josh Allen. It definitely is just a raw point score. Now, running back I guess running back, receiver. Let's start with running back for the Bills.
Yeah, so I mean, 6,700. I think it's the cheapest or second cheapest, like James Cook has been all season. But only 3 running backs have topped 100 rushing yards this season against the Broncos. And it took all of them 20 or more attempts to get there. So, like, Kenneth Walker went for 103 yards on 20 carries. Derrick Henry went for 106 yards on 23 carries. Jonathan Taylor, 107 yards on 22 carries. Like, those are the best outcomes against them. So, like, you know, James Cook hasn't had 20 carries all season. So I think rostering him is like you're completely betting on efficiency or a multi-touchdown game. Like he has 4 multi-touchdown games of the season, but this is not the most likely spot for it. So he's probably a pass for me.
And then how about receiver?
Broncos have given up some massive games to wide receivers in the second half of the year. Zay Flowers went 5 for 172 and 2 touchdowns. Jerry Jeudy went 9 for 235 and a touchdown, like just a few weeks ago at that massive game.
Yeah.
T. Higgins 11 for 131 and 3 touchdowns. Like there's been, and that's just like since week 9 have had massive games. Jacoby Myers went for like 120 yards. Jamar Chase over 100 yards. Like I think the Bills pass catchers, they're all relatively inexpensive. And I think that I think they're worth taking some shots on, like especially if Amari Cooper were to miss, and they'd be even more concentrated. But again, they're all relatively inexpensive, so I don't mind taking shots on any of these guys. I think the matchup warrants it.
Absolutely, dude. All right, with that, let's move to the Packers and the Eagles. Jordan Love, no injury designation right now, so it looks like he's good to go. But any interest in Love or just kind of this, in Love, and obviously we'll get to the Packers passing attack.
In Love, no, it's not as like Jordan Love only has one game of 20. I think he had like 21 points. He only has one game of more than 19 DK points since like week 7. So he's only, I think he's only thrown more than 30 pass attempts or attempted more than 30 pass attempts like once. So like this isn't in a game environment that's generally strong for him. I think it's a really tough spot for him to put up like a had to have it score, even at like 5,800. Like I just don't see 25 points in him. So to me, another fade. Like I'm always the guy who tries to play a tight player pool. We're just trying to cross off guys, and we'll focus on the best matchups and go from there.
Yeah, and just in playoffs, just avoiding duds can be half the battle. Josh Jacobs, feel like they're going to ride him in this one?
Yeah, I think they're going to try. Eagles have been really stout against the run all year. I think Rico Dowdle, who went for 104 yards on 23 carries, is the only running back to top 100 rushing yards. Against Philly, like their defense is stout. They've only allowed 5 rushing touchdowns all season. Not a single receiving touchdown to a running back all year. So I think it's 7,700. Like I just don't see Jacobs putting up a score that crushes you. Like he just doesn't have, like if you look at it, I don't want to be a game log watcher, but like in his game logs, like he just doesn't put up those scores, and now he's facing a really tough matchup on the road. Like I don't see it.
Yep, I agree with you there. Passing game for the Packers, obviously, I know all too well how spread out and frustrating it can be to try and nail down who hits for them. And again, you're not going to have a ton of volume with the way that they seem to be using Love with how much he throws.
Yeah, 30 pass attempts or less most weeks. Christian Watson's out with the torn ACL, so that does condense it a little bit more between like Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, Dontavion Wicks. When these teams met earlier in the season, like Jaden Reed went for 138 yards and a touchdown, which was the best output against Philly all year. So I think that there's some upside there. I do expect Philly to be playing from ahead. So maybe this is a spot where we see a few more pass attempts. It is a little bit more concentrated. And like the Buffalo wide receivers, like all 3 of Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavion Wicks, they're all priced modestly. They're all like 4,500 to 5,500 here. So I think they're all viable. I don't expect the Packers to have much success on the ground. And I think you could lump in Tucker Kraft into that. Like he's had a really strong sophomore year. So yeah, I think I'm interested in taking some shots on Kraft at 3,700 and some of these cheaper wide receivers for Green Bay. Yeah.
Awesome, dude. How about the Eagles starting with Jalen Hurts?
Yeah, the Packers have only allowed like 1 rushing touchdown to a quarterback all season. And Hurts draws a lot of his value from his legs. And that's despite like they already faced Jalen Hurts earlier this year. They played Kyler, they played and Trevor Lawrence, like Caleb Williams, like guys that rush. So, tush push is always in play. But initially, like I think I'm drawn to the other kind of pay up guys. Like Hurts is 7,300. Like I much prefer Josh Allen. Like, in the next game, I much prefer the rookie. So, we'll get there when we get there. But no, I'm not running to play them. I think the ground game is interesting. Hurts is recovering from that concussion, so I would expect Philly to lean on Barkley here. He accounted for 132 yards and 3 touchdowns when these teams played earlier this year. Other running backs, more bell cow, like Barkley, JT, Aaron Jones, Kyron Williams, Joe Mixon, they all exceeded 100 yards against Green Bay this season. So I think this is definitely a spot where I like Barkley. I think I like Barkley a little bit more than Henry, but I think they're both really strong plays on this slate. So they'll be a little tougher to fit because they're both over 8K, but I think it's one that I like. And then honestly, like the Packers have been able to kind of bottle up opposing wide receiver ones or just opposing wide receivers in general. So like back in week 1 when these teams played, like AJ Brown went for 109 yards and a touchdown. It's the best game against the Packers all season. And that's despite them facing like Justin Jefferson twice and Amon-Ra St. Brown twice because they play in the same division, and Deebo Samuel, Tyreek Hill. This is probably a spot that I'm going to fade AJ Brown and Devonta Smith. Like, to me, this is Saquon Barkley or bust for me on Philadelphia.
Okay. Yep. Sounds good. Let's move to Washington, Tampa Bay. This is a game I'm excited about. Let's start with, like you said, Jaden Daniels, the rookie, starting in his first playoff game.
Yeah, I mean, he's I think the third most expensive quarterback on the slate, but honestly, like rightfully slow. He's got 2 games of 35 or more DK points in his last 3 outings. It's a great matchup on paper. I think this is a spot I've got a ton of interest in. Tampa Bay has gotten torched by some quarterbacks, and they've kind of had a pretty weak schedule playing in the NFC South and getting Atlanta twice, Carolina twice, New Orleans twice.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like Kirk Cousins threw for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns against them. Lamar Jackson went for 300 and something and 5 touchdowns. Like, Mahomes 300 and 3 touchdowns. Like Purdy threw for 375. Like even Bryce Young went for 300 plus yards and multiple touchdowns. So when they played back in week 1, Jaden Daniels rushed for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns. So to me, I think this is a great spot for him. I think if we move,
Daniels might be my favorite play on the slate, as you say that, and just when he is pushed in games, he makes plays and just he can put up points in a hurry. So let's look at how about the running games for the Commanders?
Yeah, no, Austin Eckler is going to be back, just more competition. They've got competition, with Jaden Daniels as well. Honestly, I'm going to look elsewhere than the Commanders' backfield.
And then
I think,
go ahead.
I was going to say, I think if you're building around Jaden Daniels, I think pairing him with either Zach Ertz or Terry McLaurin, honestly feels kind of preferable. The Commanders' offense almost entirely, their passing offense at least, flows completely through those 2 guys. I think McLaurin has 117 targets. Zach Ertz has 91 targets on the season. And those 2 account for 20 of the team's 28 receiving touchdowns. So if you're going anywhere, I know that they're a little cheaper than they have been. I like both options if you're playing Jaden Daniels. I think overall this is a game that I do like. I think the final 2 games of the slate, Washington, Tampa, and Minnesota, Los Angeles, I think are the 2 best game environments. The 2 likeliest to produce kind of that had to have it shootout type game.
Yeah, man, I feel the same. So how about Baker Mayfield and just looking at Tampa Bay now? Yeah,
I mean, first 6 weeks of the season, Commanders allowed some massive games. Since then, since week 6, no quarterback has thrown for 250 yards against them. So they've kind of played some weaker competition since week 6, but again, that's still 11 games. And they've been impressive. So I think Baker's a dynamic option at the position. We'll keep him in consideration just because I like this game. But he's kind of a middling piece for me. I don't really love him. So he probably won't make the final cut because I'll probably get down to like 3 quarterbacks, and I'm not sure he'll be it.
Okay. Then Tampa Bay backfield.
Yeah, I mean, Commanders less than impressive against the run this season. Allowed rushing performances of like 132 and 2 touchdowns to Henry, 150 and 2 touchdowns to Barkley, 129 and a touchdown to DeAndre Swift. Bijan Robinson went for 90 and 2 touchdowns. James Conner over 100 and a touchdown. So, with the season on the line last week for Tampa, like Bucky Irving has been it. Like Rachaad White didn't see a touch last week. Didn't touch the ball once in a must-win game. So, Irving has seen 17 or more touches in 4 straight games and 7 out of the last 8 games for the Bucs. So, to me, like he's probably my favorite Bucs piece. Through the air, wide receivers, they fared like generally well against the Commanders secondary. When these teams met back early in the season, Evans went for 61 yards and 2 touchdowns. But I think I think my eye is kind of first drawn to like Jalen McMillan, the rookie, who's kind of filling that Chris Godwin role the second half of the year. He's got 5 straight games of like 16.7 or more DK points. He's 5,200. He's seeing targets. Like, I think you got to find some value. I mean, he's not uber cheap, but he's 5,200. Like, I think he's a strong option in this game.
And let's see, Cade Otton. Cade Otton back. He's. What do you think of the tight end spot here, Tampa Bay?
I think that we've talked about multiple better options. He's not cheap enough where I feel like I want to go there.
With that, let's move, dude, to Rams, Vikings, Sam Darnold on the road. Looking to prove himself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, Darnold had a decent outing when these teams met back in week 8. I think he threw for like 240, 250 and 2 touchdowns. There's upside. I think the Rams have allowed like Kyler and Brock Purdy, Geno Smith, Drake May, Josh Allen. They all went for over 300 yards with multiple touchdowns. So there's upside for Sam Darnold here in this matchup. But I think like for 800 less, I'd rather just play Stafford in the same game.
Yep. I feel you there.
I think the ground matchup for Minnesota is like, it's kind of middling for Aaron Jones. He's dealing with that quad injury. So there's a long list of running backs that saw 20 plus touches in this matchup. Barkley, Connor, Swift, Madison, Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, Jordan Mason, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Garendo, and Ramondre Stevenson. They all saw more than 20 touch-ups in this matchup, 20 touches. But only Barkley or Swift put up 20 DK points. So I don't know that this is a spot that I'm like super drawn to be honest.
Yep, I feel you there. And then how about these Vikings receivers? And, we can loop in Hawkinson there too, the pass catchers. How much interest do you have there?
I have a lot of interest. Rams have, they've allowed some really strong games to opposing wide receivers this year. And I don't think anybody needs me to tell you that Justin Jefferson is really good. Notable games against the Rams: 11 for 173 and 3 to Juwan Jennings, 7 for 180 and 2 touchdowns to JSN. Shakir went for over 100 and a touchdown. AJ Brown went for over 100 and a touchdown. Jameson Williams went for over 100 and a touchdown. Marvin Harrison went for 130 and 2 touchdowns. Back when these teams played back in week 8, Jefferson went 8 for 115, dropped a touchdown. But I think it's a really strong matchup. And like opposing tight ends have found strong success too. Like McBride, like last week, I think, or 2 weeks ago, went 12 for 123 and a touchdown. Tucker Kraft went for 88 and 2 touchdowns. Brock Bowers went 10 for 93. So to me, like Hawkinson's really in play. Same with Jefferson. Both really strong options, like having that Monday night hammer, like the last game
hammer
of the slate. And let's talk about the Rams kind of briefly, then we'll build a lineup quick and get out of here. I know we're a little longer than we usually go, but I don't know. I think people kind of like this game by game, position by position breakdown.
I mean, it's the playoffs, dude. Playoffs. Playoffs.
So, yeah, I mean, I alluded to Stafford a little bit earlier. 5,700. Like, he's probably my favorite pay down option at the position. Vikings have allowed some really strong games to basically every above average quarterback they faced all year. Purdy threw for like 320. Love threw for like 390 and 4 touchdowns. Goff went 280 and 2. Will Levis threw for 295. Caleb Williams went 340 and 2 touchdowns. Kirk Cousins went for 340. Geno Smith went for 314 and 3 touchdowns. Like, even back when these teams first met, like Stafford went 280 and 4 touchdowns, which was a game that the Rams won 30-20 when they first met this season. So a total of 50, which is about where I think this game is set at. So I really like him. Through the air, like, I really like Puka Nacua. Like, I think Puka Nacua, we're going to skip running back for a second. Like, I think Puka Nacua is like one of my favorite, if not my favorite play on this slate. Like, the Vikings gave up 20 or more DK points to pass catchers 16 times in 17 games. So basically one a game, they gave up 20 plus points to a pass catcher. Since returning from his injury back like in week 8, Nacua is averaging over 10 targets a game. This matchup doesn't get any better. Like, he's probably my favorite play on the slate.
Hey, you heard it here, guys.
And then at running back
play on the slate, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Running back.
Yeah, running back, like Kyren Williams, I think he's in play. He's averaging 21 touches a game this season. He's got 16 total touchdowns in 17 games played, so he's squarely in play. I think he's going to kind of be the forgotten man at 7,400, to be honest with you. You see that if you move to running back, like DK's got that red 9 next to him. I think that scares people away, but the matchup's not really as daunting as it seems. Like, a bunch of running backs have exceeded 100 yards, scored a touchdown against Minnesota. So I like Kyren Williams as well, but again, you can't play everybody. So
very true.
I think we kind of hit through. I think we kind of hit on all the guys.
Yeah, we did. So with that, dude, let's throw a build together here. Where do you want to go with this? Where do you want to start?
Well, favorite quarterback on the slate at the pay down option, 5,700, Matt Stafford. Let's start there.
And I'm guessing you want Puka in here as well.
You're a sharp guy. You've been listening the last couple minutes. Yeah, I think Puka is a for sure play in this lineup. And then let's eliminate the tight end position from this game as well. And let's get kind of that mini correlation with TJ Hawkinson. I think that's a really strong spot. I think that you could consider Justin Jefferson. He's super expensive. You could also build this lineup with Kyren Williams as well. But I think that's going to limit where we can go with running backs. So I think my favorite pay up option at running back, and I think we're going to have the salary for it, is Saquon Barkley. So
yeah, let's
go Saquon Barkley and the Eagles D. I always kind of like to have this correlation on these shorter slates. I think for basically the same salary, you can go down from Barkley to Derrick Henry and then go up in that salary up to the Ravens. Like, those are basically like 1-for-1 swaps. So I like both of those as options, but let's stick with Barkley Eagles here. 5,200 left per position. We've already used D. Let's pay down at running back. I think we said favorite running back kind of at that pay down option. Jaleel McLaughlin. I think that he's intriguing on this build. I don't mind him as a one-off piece. Like, I don't know that I need any other piece from that game. I wouldn't mind a Buffalo wide receiver. We'll see where we land there. Just, I know they all kind of fit into that low 5K range, which is where it's looking like we're going to be with like 5,300 a spot.
Yeah, no, this is eye-opening because, yeah, it's like there's not any screaming value. But, yeah, where do you want to go next here with 2 receiver slots? still to fill.
Yeah, let's look in the 5K range for wide receivers, and let's kind of decide on what we want to do here. I think if we just kind of talk about the game environments we liked, I think McMillan is a strong play for me here. He's 5,200. I really like the floor that we've kind of seen out of him. Where else do I want to go here? If we're not going to play Henry, I think this is a lineup that we look at either Likely or Mark Andrews, or we go to Rashad Bateman. Let's go Rashad Bateman here. I think Bateman has more upside. I think that Rashad Bateman, we've seen the 40, 50-yard touchdowns from him. He's going to be operating as the alpha in this offense, so I like that. And then we've got 5,600 left on flex. So just hit me in that mid 5K range, and let's kind of see. I think that if we're playing Barkley and the Eagles, like, it would make sense that Green Bay's in a trailing game script and throwing more, so we could take a shot on Jaden Reed or Romeo Doubs. I think this is a build where we could consider Khalil Shakir as a correlation with Jaleel McLaughlin. So those are probably my favorite options. I would say let's go Romeo Doubs here, and then just for a housekeeping point of view, like swap him with Nakua.
I like that.
Just so that Nakua, who's got the latest game, is in the flex.
Let's do that. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Awesome, dude. And there it is. So for those of you listening on the pod, we finished with Matthew Stafford, Saquon Barkley, Jaleel McLaughlin, Romeo Doubs, Jalen McMillan, Rashad Bateman, TJ Hawkinson, Puka Nacua, who is Slant's favorite play on the entire slate, and the Eagles defense stat. Great stuff, man. And I know you are going to be just cramming in last minute with the, maybe a few more best ball rosters, certainly streaming some more. And then you said you're going to play every slate, right? Like, because of especially the staggered starts Saturday, Sunday. It's going to be a busy weekend for you, brother, and for me as well. We'll be there.
Yeah, send the wife to the spa. Tell her we'll see her Sunday afternoon.
There you go. It's a win-win. Awesome, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Stat, good luck this weekend for the wild card and the best ball stuff. And thanks for the time, brother. We'll see you.
Yep, always enjoy it, my friend.
All right, guys. See ya. All right.